it's also it very much insulates you from a tendency towards parochialism, which is
Yeah.
what you do.
Parochialism. Yeah.
Um, Final question, because it just occurred to me whilst you were talking about bureaucracy and stuff, and I know that you're Japanese, you're an expert in Japan as much as anyone else. I remember reading somewhere that Japan was the only example of a bureaucracy that disbanded itself or defeated or stopped itself. Is that right? Have I got that wrong? Bureaucracy is very difficult to stop, but they can be stopped. You can insulate yourself against them. And in something happened, and I can't remember when it was. I think it was 19th century, where Japanese bureaucracy decided to weaken itself rather than strengthen itself. Is that?
Well, it's partly news to me. I mean,
Right.
bureaucracies, there are more and less bureaucratic civilizations. And Tocqueville talks about the fact that France is very bureaucratic and always has been. Rule bound. Roman law is very rule bound, and French bureaucracy is very strong. Whereas he loves Britain and America because it's unbureaucratic, muddled, confused, ad hoc, unprincipled, immoral, but gets things done. It's very similar to Ruskin's theory of art. He has two types of art system: the Gothic fox of Northern Europe, which is the Gothic cathedrals and everything turbulent and unruled, and you make it up as you go along. And classical civilizations, which have strong rules and everything is balanced and harmonic and so on, of Southern Europe. And one is dead and strong, and one is confused and weak. So you find it in art, and you find it in philosophy, and you find it in many fields. Now, the Japanese are pretty unbureaucratic historically. They had a feudal system, which was like ours. In other words, a lot of power is delegated down, and the opposite of bureaucracy is sort of delegation, so that you don't have general rules. Each person lower down the system has a lot of autonomy, and you have very general rules, customs, but as long as you stay within those. So the opposite of professionalization. Bureaucracy is business schools. It's trying to learn a set of rules to run businesses, which are, of course, a waste of time. Most of life, the British believe, are not subject to specification in detail. You give people a general rule, and then it's up to the individual to interpret it. Just to take an example, which actually goes against what I said in Japan, but basically, when I became a university teacher or fellow of King's College, I waited to be given some set of rules about how I should behave. And there are the college statutes and the university statutes, but they're very, very general. They're mainly to do with pensions and things like that. It didn't say what I should do. It didn't even say how many lectures I should give or how much time I should spend on lecturing and other things, or what I shouldn't do. It didn't try and specify what I should do or what I shouldn't do. Isaiah Berlin differentiates between two forms of liberty, between positive and negative. Positive liberty is where you tell people what they must do. Negative liberty is where you tell people what they mustn't do. And he loved the British tradition, which is based on negative liberty. Now, negative liberty is an example, a good example is a game of football. You don't tell footballers, you must run 100 yards this way and then 100 yards that way, and then you must kick the ball in that direction. You can't specify in detail what you do. What you do is you have about 4 negative rules. You mustn't touch the ball with your hand unless you're the goalkeeper. You mustn't get offside, the offside rule. You mustn't hit another person or spit at them or whatever. You mustn't kick the ball off the pitch, otherwise it goes up. That's it. The rest is up to you. And much of British life is like that. There are things, a few basic things you must not do. If possible, you mustn't murder someone, you mustn't cheat someone, you must. We learnt these very simple things, and the rest is improvisation. Now, when my friend Kenichi came to King's College on the first occasion, and he said, "Alan, you are a fellow of King's. I want to learn something about the Cambridge and King's. Can you give me your bureaucratic manuals on how King's works?" I said, I gave him a very thin thing of the statutes of King's College. He said, "No, not this, this is the big volume." I said, "Nothing. There's nothing. I was never given anything. When I became head of department, no one gave me a list of things I should or shouldn't do. I was just expected to know what I did." And he said, "Oh, well, in Japan, we get, when we get this mound." Now, the special thing about Japan, of course, is, and where it does conform to my previous argument, is that this huge volumes is worthless. You have to have it, and maybe you're even examined on it, and then you toss it into a bottom of your filing cabinet, and you never think about it again. Because Japan is not based on bureaucracy, it's based on personal relationships and on basic things about what it is to be Japanese. And that applies to many things in Japan. Written information in Japan is worthless because it's already condensing reality into a form where it no longer applies. The moment you write a rule down, there are exceptions to it. So this applies, for example, in Japanese contracts. I was told by my Japanese friends, we don't have contracts in Japan. I said, well, modernity is based on the idea of having contracts. You agree to do something and then you write, "Oh, those things, yes. Well, yes. When I bought this house, we signed a bit of paper. I've never looked at it at the time, and I've never looked at it since. I don't know what it said. And same when we had a piano teacher for my daughters, we may have signed a bit of paper that she would do these hours. The moment we signed it, it's worthless because it's all about our relationship. And if that breaks down or something goes wrong, it's no good going back to a bit of paper written 20 years ago and saying we signed this contract. The legal system would just laugh at you if you brought these things in. So it's far more fluid.
Right.
And Britain is still, to a large extent, mercifully, run in this sort of ad hoc way, which appalls people from other cultures who are used to a decent bureaucracy.